Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to answer a letter from somebody whose husband forgot to tell his mom that they're married. But before we begin, we're just going to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners.
Yes, we are not professionals. We are not trained in this. And to be honest, I don't know if I don't know what to say in today's letter. My advice is just my camaraderie. Do you know what I mean? What?
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of affirming in this letter.
Yeah. Sam's only note on the top of this letter just says wild! ! This is all to say we're not professionals. We are not trained in this. So please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble and sometimes lacking musings on the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love. All right, I'm going to dive right into today's letter. It's from random stranger from the internet whose pronouns are she, her, who's writing to us from Confusion City. My situation might be a little niche, and I hope there are parts of it that maybe y'all could relate to. So a little background. My partner, he, him, who we'll call Austin, and I are coming up on our second wedding anniversary. We moved pretty fast, moved to a new state together after 3 months fast, but I don't regret it at all. The drawbacks of us moving so fast, though, was that we weren't able to get to know each other's families well before we got married. Austin has been around my family a little bit since they lived within driving distance of us, but his mom lived on the other side of the country, so I'd only met her once before we got married. So while our parents were understandably hesitant, they still offered us support, though that looked different from each side. My parents aren't really involved in my life, so telling them about this was more like an update than a big decision. Austin, however, is pretty close with his mom. She raised him, her only child, as a young single mom, and she's a therapist who is very emotionally intelligent, so they're able to talk a lot more openly to each other, and they typically talk on the phone once a week. She was initially skeptical, but did her best to be as supportive of her son marrying a complete stranger. We initially planned to have a small ceremony in the mountains a few hours away from my family. My dad is in bad health, so he can't really travel easily, and tried to pull together something quickly before we were set to relocate across the country to Austin's new job. It became super stressful, and we finally decided to postpone getting married until we had time to be settled in our new home. We ended up eloping, just the two of us, and it was incredible. I sent my parents some of the pictures we had taken, and they were totally happy to support it just being the two of us. I'm sure that Austin is my good true love. He's the kindest person I've ever met, a great listener, funny, generous, weird, and so good looking. I'm really proud of the relationship we've built and how well we've learned to communicate. We've both said that we feel like we can tell the other person absolutely anything without judgment. Although after this week, I'm learning there's some things he didn't tell me about. Austin is currently away for a month in a super remote area for work, so he has no contact with the outside world until the middle of September. About a week in, his mom texted me to see how I was doing on my own and to see how things were going. While we were chatting, I sent her a bunch of pictures of my husband with our dogs the day before he left. She said the pictures were cute and then asked when we got married or if the ring he was wearing in the pictures was just meant to symbolize our relationship. My jaw dropped. I told her we've been married for nearly 2 years and asked if Austin had told her. And apparently he had not. I froze because I hadn't realized this was somehow a secret. His mom called me the next day and we talked over an hour trying to see how this might have happened and that it surely must be a mistake. When I told her it had happened almost 2 years ago, I could just hear the heartbreak in her voice. I felt so terrible for telling her this way and told her that I had no idea. He also hadn't told her that we bought our very first house and I felt my stomach sink. Neither of us could make sense of this. It's completely out of character for Austin. He is the least confrontational person on the planet, but I cannot for the life of me understand what he could have been afraid of by telling his mom we were eloping. And I didn't have a good answer for his mom, who feels really hurt and betrayed by this. And because he's going to be blocked off from the outside world, his mom and I now just have to sit with this for 2 more weeks. It's awkward and uncomfortable, and it concerns me. If he left out these really important life events in talking with his mom, what things is he leaving out when he talks to me? I can't decide if I'm more confused, angry, hurt, or uneasy knowing this. I just can't fathom how he could do something that really hurts his mom and what the thought process was about eventually telling her, if there even was one. I know he's ultimately the only person who knows why, but something like this just doesn't fit with the person I know him as. Obviously, this makes me start to question if he's omitting things from our conversations too. If he's just leaving out 2 major life events for 2 years when talking to his mom, who's to say that he can't just be the same with me? Anxiety spiral, etc. I absolutely adore my partner and want to find a way to move past this bizarre event. But the whole thing with his mom has me really rattled. I feel like my trust in him has been really shaken. I feel like I don't even recognize these actions as something Austin would do. I want to believe that this was just maybe an elaborate attempt to make everyone happy without any confrontation, but with the amount of time that's passed, it now feels like an intentional lie, and I'm not even sure how to talk about this with him because I can't exactly ask him to tell me everything he hasn't told me. No, yes, you technically
could do that. Yeah,
you probably could just, yeah. It's hard because I feel like my issue now is with trust. But if we move past this, I'll have to trust that he'll follow through with his promise to be better. So now, finally, to my question, how can I find peace in knowing that in order to repair my trust in my partner, I'll have to invest more trust into him, that he's making changes? It feels nearly impossible to have to give more of what's been broken to try to put it back together in one piece. That is a fucking phenomenal way to talk about trust moving forward, that you have to give more of it after it's been broken.
That's real.
Whew. 5 years in, and that's just like a great way to phrase it. Anyway, I want to use this as a way for us to learn and grow, but these lies by omission have made me question if I can do it. I'd really love y'all's perspective on this sticky situation. Love and appreciate you both so much.
Oh my goodness, random stranger. Thank you for writing to us with this question. And I know that we were kind of making jokes about how wild this question was at the beginning, but that doesn't mean that it's not also really challenging for you in this moment. And I think that anyone would feel a certain amount of mistrust after this situation, right? This feeling of like, oh, I've been lied to. Also, like this feeling of like getting caught in this like embarrassing moment with his mom too, right? Like he's the one that lied, but you're the one that's facing the consequences for that lie. Like that's big. And then also he's not around. He's gone. You can't contact him. And so all you can sort of do is like sit in your own thoughts and feelings about this and kind of cycle through them. Like just what a challenging situation to be in. Like this is definitely like a wild story, but also it's very real in its consequences, right?
It's real.
It's really real in how it's playing out for you. And I don't know that Sierra and I are going to be able to offer you any clarity about why your husband did this because we're not him and we're also confused, right?
Very.
But I think what we will do is hopefully offer some perspective about what it means to rebuild trust with someone who has broken that trust with you. So we're going to get into that, but first we're going to take a quick break.
All right, before we dive into how to repair trust, I want to echo Sam's sentiments and say that I feel really confused and I'm struggling to get to the advice, to get to the trust building because I feel so confused. You know, like I'm trying to understand what would make someone do this. And it sounds like you are too. Obviously you are, letter writer. Like, this is your marriage. This is your partner. But I see you doing the work to understand, like, he's not confrontational. Like, maybe he just didn't want to deal with the conversation, or, the one thing I will say is that I have been shocked in the last 5 years of my therapy work, or my life, just looking back on the first, 30 years or whatever. I have really been surprised at my ability to avoid the choices that I made to avoid conflict or to avoid disappointing. That capacity is higher and scarier than I would ever like to admit, and that's where I've lost myself the most. That's where I've made the decisions in my life that I'm most unproud of or ashamed of, and so despite the physical confusion and shock that I feel at this letter and what your husband did, I have to humble myself by being like, I have the capacity to do wild things to try to protect myself. And those wild choices in the past I would have very little explanation for. That also, that's me sharing something that is even hard to say. And I don't know what your husband's doing. And I'm not even trying to say that I'm trying to humanize him a little, because I'm having a hard time understanding what would lead to this question. But like we always say, he didn't write in, you did. And so I really just want to affirm that this is really questionable behavior, and that this would really create quite a crack in my foundation. I'm trying to think about if something comparable like this happened. The closest thing I can think of is I have been in 2 relationships for several months before the person told me they were divorced. And that felt like quite an omission, because it felt like then they were hiding something or hiding other things, because why wouldn't you tell me that you're divorced? Because it's not obviously there's stigma around it, but I hoped that I had proved myself to be somebody who would be able to accept that information. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine the layers of this. Like Sam said, 2 years later, having to be the middle person between your mother and your husband. Yeah, I don't know. That's just I don't know.
I will say that as somebody who comes from a family of poor communicators, yeah. I don't know that I could imagine one of us not telling our family that they are married for 2 years, but I can understand the sentiment of being we're not super practiced at telling each other big things about ourselves, yes, or our lives.
Yeah. And
is it okay? Probably not. And is it the function and of the dynamics of our family relationships? Yes, it is, which are difficult to change.
I'm glad you said that too, because I also wanted to acknowledge, like the letter writer does, that everybody has a different relationship to their family. And the way in which I share and communicate with my family is not a universal thing. And, you even describe your husband as being really close to his mother and talking once a week, but what are they talking about? And what is the quality and vulnerability of their communication? And also at the same time, it is, despite how uncomfortable or unhealthy his communication is with his mother, he did this fundamentally hurtful, I'll say, hurtful thing that fractured the trust in your relationship. And that is real, despite all of the reason why he might have done this, all of the pre-existing foundations in his parental relationship that led him to make this choice, or whatever the fuck. Your feelings in it are 100% valid, because I would be rattled. Let me tell you,
Absolutely.
I would be rattled. I'd be angry. I'd be disappointed. I'd be hurt, and I'd be really, really confused.
And I think especially because of the piece around, I think it's kind of twofold, which is
yeah,
maybe the issue isn't that he didn't tell his mom. I think one of the issues that I would have in a similar situation is that it's okay if you don't want to tell your mom about this, but you have to tell me why
that
and
yes,
that we're not doing this, right? Because now I'm in a situation where I am right? Because
Yeah.
like your relationship with your mom is your relationship with your mom. It's not mine.
Yeah.
So like you get to decide, but also like you need to loop me in on like what I'm supposed to say and not supposed to say.
I would be pissed. I mean, I would be pissed.
No, absolutely. And this is something that has happened to me in my family dynamics. And so like I am also like I will withhold information from people in your life if you want me to, but you have to tell me to.
Like your camping trip and your Beyonce tickets. Subscribe to Patreon to hear Sam and I get into a fight about those things.
Okay. Wow.
No, I think it's a great example.
It is a great example because I just didn't think to tell you about those things. And you were deeply offended. You were like, I can't believe that you wouldn't tell me. And I was like, I don't know.
Surface level offended. Surface level offended. Maybe deeply offended because you went on a camping trip without me, but
you were pretty offended by
I've healed. I've grown.
Good. Okay. And then the second thing that I think is like really hard about this is exactly what you say in the letter, which is that like, okay, well then what big things are you withholding from me then? Right? Like if you're a person who's capable of keeping this type of secret from your mom and also keeping the secret about the secret from me, then like what else might you be not telling us? What other things might you be withholding from us? And I think it's like, you know, you're feeling confused about this because this situation is confusing, right? You are feeling a lack of trust because this situation is something that would undermine trust, right? Like you're not making this up. Like this is something that you two are definitely going to need to figure out and address. And you're justified in all of these different feelings and emotions that are coming up for you about like how uncomfortable and crunchy and weird this situation is for you. And I think what I like about, you know, what you've told me about your relationship is that it feels like you're going to be able to have a conversation with him about this, right? Like, and it's clear that you're like gearing up for it, right? Like it's clear he's like going to get back from his work trip and you're going to be like, okay, let's talk.
I am sweating just thinking about that man walking through the threshold into their newly purchased house.
Yeah, be like
that son of a bitch has no fucking clue what fucking shitstorm. I live for that.
That's real.
Just imagining. I don't live through that because I know it's very real. And but man, I would be at the kitchen table. I would be clicking my fingers on the kitchen. I would go get long acrylic nails just so that I could gesture more adamantly.
Just be like, so
click, 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 click.
How was your trip?
Yeah. Man, I miss drama in my relationship. Just kidding. Like I don't. No, but like part of me loves imagining what a fuck I would do.
Seriously.
Oh man, my heart rate just went up just thinking about it.
I know.
Letter writer, I love you. I love you, and I don't envy you.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, as you're thinking about how to have this conversation, you know, I think one of the things that you can focus on is like how this situation made you feel, right? And I think you should talk to him about all of the different things that you wrote in your letter about like how weird and embarrassing and uncomfortable it was to get caught in a lie that wasn't yours, right? Like this feeling of like, well, why didn't you tell me that we weren't going to tell her, right? Like there's weirdness there. And also like, these feelings of like, it makes it hard for me to trust you because it makes me wonder what else you're withholding from me. Right. And it makes me feel like I don't know what to expect from you anymore. Right. Like, I think you should talk about all of those things. And I don't think that this is an irreconcilable thing that happened. Right. Partially because I don't know enough about his motivations or the story behind why this happened. Right. Like I could look at this and say like, this is a huge red flag. And I think it is a huge red flag, but it's not a red flag that can't also be like put in its proper context, if that makes sense. Right. Like,
yes,
like it feels really big right now. And if he was like not talking about it or like unwilling to like see your feelings in this, I'd be like, no, this is not a good situation. But like, we haven't had that conversation yet because he's gone. And so it just like, it throws everything into question about like, what's actually happening here. And I think you owe it to him and to yourself to at least try and get to the bottom of some of this, right? To have that conversation, that curious conversation about like, why did you do this? And this also hurt me. No matter why you did it,
Yeah.
it hurt me deeply. So like, we need to figure this out.
Yeah. I'll also say that, like, you use the phrase "get to the bottom of this," and I remember, like, this is not cheating behavior. You know, this is not that sort of infidelity, although it is mind-boggling and foundation cracking. You know, I will say that be wary of trying to find a palatable explanation for this
Mm-hmm.
over trusting your own intuition or understanding that you might not ever understand why he did this, right? Like, how about this? I don't want you to overflex your compassion and understanding. No. What am I trying to say? I don't want you. He might never be able to give you a palatable explanation for all of this.
Yep.
And, you know, when I was being cheated on and I worked so hard to fucking understand why my ex cheated on me. I worked so hard on that. You know, like, I just wanted to understand so that I could, like, swallow it a little bit more smoothly or understand it so that I could justify all of the behavior. And this is not the same. I want to say that, like, you know, this could be a relationship ending experience for one person and not for another. And I truly believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if I would end my marriage on this, but it would really restructure it until I felt like I was back on the right footing or whatever.
For sure.
You might not ever get that palatable explanation because sometimes there's no good way to explain the shitty choices that we've made.
For sure.
And what I want you to focus on, what I want you to prioritize over trying to understand his actions is, how am I honoring how this is making me feel and tending to my wounds and my needs? You know, not that you can't do both at the same time. You're going to have to flex your compassion. You're going to have to flex your curiosity, as Sam said, you're going to have to give trust to build trust, like you said in your letter. And we can give and give and give and give and give and then realize, like, this is not a relationship I want to stay in. This is not trust that I can rebuild, or there's no explanation that makes me feel safe in this relationship again. I just want to make sure you keep taking that internal temperature of how you're feeling, in addition to being like, let me understand why you did this, because it's really fucking confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because like you said in your letter, you're going to have to extend the very thing that's been broken in order to move forward. And I think that that's really important for us to remember when we have been hurt, is that, like, yeah, absolutely, we can talk about accountability after harm has been caused, right? We can talk about the idea of, like, okay, well, we're going to have check-ins every week intentionally to talk about things that we may be uncomfortable bringing to each other, right? Like, and we're going to agree to push ourselves in those conversations to say difficult things, right? Like, I think that that's a great accountability to set up some sort of structure. Accountability, I don't think, looks like you monitoring all of his conversations with his mom, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's ways in which we can confuse accountability with actually a lack of trust, right?
Yeah,
we're not actually trusting anymore. We are just, like, trying to prevent harm from happening again. And that's not going to happen. And, like, you know, you've talked about this on the podcast with that relationship with that guy who was continually cheating on you. You put a bunch of accountability into the relationship, and guess what? And it didn't work because the trust wasn't actually there. You didn't trust him. You were just making sure that he called you every night, which is like a totally different thing. I was trying to make
sure it was worth it, and it wasn't. Yeah,
absolutely. Exactly. Right. So I think that there's, like, you're gonna have to trust him. Like, that's it. Like, you're gonna have to trust him. There can be accountability, right? Both of those things can exist at the same time, but trust doesn't look like policing or, like, making sure that everything is, like, perfectly in line all the time. It's gonna take you trusting that exact same thing, like you said, that exact same thing that just got broken. in order to
Yep.
move the relationship forward. And you're going to have to trust yourself in this as well. Like Sierra said, right? You're going to have to trust that you are able to move forward through this, or that you're not able to move forward through this. And both of those things are okay. But you also, like Sierra said, need to be coming back to yourself and saying, like, is this still working? Right? Like, we're doing things, we're trying things. Is this enough? Is this the right thing? Am I able to get to a point where I can trust him still? And it's okay if you can't, and it's also okay if you can. But the way forward is going to be challenging for sure. And it's going to take vulnerability, which is really hard, especially when we've just been hurt. But that vulnerability is necessary for a relationship, even when harm has been caused, right? It's not going to function without it. And it's harder right now than it was maybe 4 weeks ago when you thought everything was good, but it is still a vital ingredient to making a relationship function. And you're going to still need to expose that soft belly of yours to what could be harm, but what could also become a wonderful, wonderful belly rub. I'm just going to go with like you're a dog. You're not a dog. You're a human, but who doesn't love a belly rub?
Really quickly before we wrap up too, I was just thinking this is like an ideal scenario to lend to couples therapy.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's great.
Yeah. Weekly mediated sessions with a professional.
I think that would be super helpful. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you have the means and the time, I would prioritize something like that. Or like I think that at this point in my life, I would seek the professional support in something like this that was so confusing, that you wanted to understand, that you wanted to get over, that would be a great place to exercise that.
For sure.
All right, my darling, this is so tricky. Despite Sam and I laughing and calling this wild, you obviously, hopefully know that you have all of our compassion and as much support as we can give you as strangers across the internet. We love you very much, and we hope this helps.
Absolutely. Thank you for writing. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you want more content from us, or if you want ad-free episodes, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to all of our episodes without ads. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review, and consider, this literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more brokenhearted souls who need 2 random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all the magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his music and podcasts. And remember, trust takes vulnerability, and vulnerability takes trust. There is no way around it. There's no way of avoiding it. We have to offer ourselves up to the possibility of being hurt in order to pursue the possibility of connection. And if all else fails,
just break up.